Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be going on a deep dive into the history of Ukraine.
That's right, using the book The History of Ukraine, from early settlements to modern independence.
So we'll be going back all the way back to the earliest periods of Ukrainian history.
And we'll be going all the way through to the current conflicts.
Really trying to see how this nation was shaped and where it might be headed.
Right. I mean, Ukraine has a fascinating story, really one of resilience and cultural exchange.
And a struggle for autonomy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe a good place to start is with those ancient roots.
Sure.
One of the earliest civilizations we know of in the region is the Trypillian culture.
Right. And they were really something. I mean, flourishing way back, 4,500 to 3,000 BCE. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, that's incredible. They were known for their advanced pottery, agricultural practices, and even had proto-cities.
Proto-cities. I mean, that's a really sophisticated level of development for the time.
And I think it speaks to the recurring theme in Ukrainian history.
Oh, and what's that?
The impact of external influences.
Yeah.
And that comes from Ukraine's location on the Eurasian steppe.
Right, smack dab in the middle of this vast grassland.
Stretching from Eastern Europe all the way to Asia.
It was really a crossroads of cultures.
And that brings us to the Scythians in the 7th century BCE.
Oh, yeah, the Scythians.
These nomadic warriors were known for their equestrian skill.
Oh, yeah, and also intricate gold work.
Right, they had these incredible trade networks connected to distant lands like Greece.
And they didn't just pass through, they really left their mark.
Yeah, they influenced the local populations.
Adding yet another layer to the cultural tapestry of the region.
Yeah, and speaking of external influences, we can't forget the Greek colonies along the Black Sea coast.
Yeah.
Cities like Olbia and Chersonesus introduced Hellenistic culture, this fusion of Greek, Egyptian, and Persian ideas.
A real melting pot.
And this brought huge advancements in art, architecture, philosophy, even political organization. All of this highlights how Ukraine has always been this dynamic space, a place where cultures meet and interact.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
And maybe the best example of this is the emergence of the Kievan Rus in the 9th century CE.
Okay.
So Slavic tribes had already settled in the region by the 5th and 6th centuries. And then they came under the influence of Varangian rulers.
Sometimes called Vikings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these various groups united to form the powerful Kievan Rus state.
I see. With Kiev as the capital.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And Kiev's location on the Dnieper River was key to their success.
Right, because it was a vital trade route.
Connecting Scandinavia and the Byzantine Empire.
Which meant that the Kievan Rus had a lot of control over trade.
Brought them wealth, influence. It really helped them become a major power.
Of course.
And during this period, Prince Vladimir the Great made a really impactful decision.
And what was that?
Well, in 988 CE, he adopted Christianity for the Kievan Rus.
Wow.
And specifically, he chose Eastern Orthodox Christianity,
Oh.
really solidifying cultural and religious ties with Byzantium.
Right, and shaping the religious landscape of the region, even to this day.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that this decision really distinguished the Eastern Slavs from the Catholic West.
It did.
And the religious divide between Eastern and Western Ukraine, even today,
Oh, yeah.
really reflects this turning point.
Absolutely. It shows just how long-lasting those consequences can be.
And I think when talking about the Kievan Rus, it's important to remember its legacy.
Right.
It's considered the foundation of Ukrainian, Russian, and even Belarusian statehood and culture.
Yeah, you can really see those connections.
And that shared origin, I think, adds some nuance to the discussions of these nations' later interactions.
Oh, for sure.
It really highlights this historical connection that still affects geopolitics today.
Absolutely. But I think it's important to note that this period of unity and prosperity for the Kievan Rus, it didn't last forever. The Mongols arrived in the 13th century, and they really changed the course of events.
The Mongol invasion, which culminated in the sack of Kiev in 1240, really shattered the Kievan Rus.
It did.
It fragmented the region, left it vulnerable.
And the destruction of Kiev was just devastating.
It was the heart of the Kievan Rus.
It was both symbolic and practical.
Right. It led to a decline in centralized power.
And that meant the emergence of regional principalities.
All struggling to maintain their autonomy.
Exactly.
One of those principalities, Galicia-Volhynia, located in what is now western Ukraine, tried to carry on the legacy of the Kievan Rus. but they faced a lot of pressure from external forces.
Yeah.
And this really marked the beginning of a long and difficult period for Ukraine.
Yeah, they were trying to navigate the shifting power dynamics of the region.
Exactly. And then in the late 14th century, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania absorbed a lot of Ukrainian territory.
Okay.
And under Lithuanian control, Ukrainians actually enjoyed a period of relative stability and some autonomy, which allowed for them to continue developing their culture. But still, they faced the constant challenge of preserving their identity amid the ambitions of powerful neighbors.
It's a recurring theme.
It really is.
Yeah. And that relative peace and autonomy, well, it started to change in the 16th century.
With the formation of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, this union brought about huge changes. Polish influence extended eastward.
Right, and new cultural and religious and even societal structures were introduced.
The impact on Ukrainian society was immense. Polish laws, administrative practices.
It really reshaped the political landscape.
And the spread of Catholicism,
right,
particularly among the nobility, created some religious tensions. The Ukrainian population was predominantly Orthodox.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the economic system shifted too.
Yeah, with the expansion of serfdom.
That feudal system, it bound peasants to the land.
And their lords.
Yeah.
This had long-lasting consequences.
Oh, yeah. Socially, economically, for sure.
Entrenched inequality.
Stifled economic development.
And it really contributed to unrest.
Unrest that would continue for centuries.
But amidst all of this, there was also a cultural revival among Ukrainians.
Oh, interesting.
It was a response to the pressure of Polonization.
Right.
Ukrainian intellectuals and artists, they really wanted to reaffirm their distinct cultural identity.
And this laid the groundwork for a burgeoning national consciousness.
Exactly. And it's within this context that the Cossacks emerge.
Ah, the Cossacks. Now, they were a potent force in Ukrainian history.
Yeah, appearing in the 16th and 17th century.
And they were more than just warriors.
Yeah.
They really embodied this spirit of fierce independence.
And resistance to external control.
Absolutely.
The Cossacks settled in the Zaporizhian Sich,
which was a fortified region along the Dnieper River.
And they became known for their military prowess.
Oh, and their defiance of Polish authority.
Yeah, they played a vital role defending against Tatar raids from the south.
And resisting Polish control.
Yeah, and then in 1648, the Cossack Hetmanate was established.
Under Bogdan Khmelnytsky.
This was a huge turning point.
Oh, yeah, it represents this struggle for autonomy.
Khmelnytsky, a charismatic leader. Really a skilled military mind. He led a rebellion against Polish rule, trying to create an independent Ukrainian state.
I see.
His rebellion was driven by social, economic, even religious grievances.
Oh, yeah.
And it sparked this massive uprising.
Really shook the foundations of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, his victories, the support he had from the peasantry, it showed just how deep that discontent with Polish rule was.
Right.
That yearning for self-determination.
Makes sense.
But Khmelnytsky also needed allies to secure his state.
Right.
So he made a decision in 1654 that would have lasting consequences.
What was that?
He signed the Treaty of Pereyaslav, forging an alliance with the Tsardom of Russia.
Interesting. So initially intended to protect against Polish encroachment.
Exactly.
But it ended up drawing Ukraine closer and closer to Russia.
Yeah. It's a complicated event in Ukrainian history.
Yeah.
Some see it as this moment of unity between Slavic people.
And others view it as the beginning of Ukraine losing its autonomy.
In becoming subordinate to Russia. It's a legacy that's still debated today.
It is, and it has to be seen through the lens of contemporary geopolitics.
Absolutely. And then as we move into the late 18th century, the consequences of that alliance become very clear.
How so?
The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is weakened by internal strife, external pressures, and ultimately it's partitioned by its neighbors.
Partitioned?
Yeah, by Russia, Prussia, and Austria.
Wow.
It marks a tragic turning point for Ukraine. Most of its territory ends up under the control of the Russian Empire.
Okay.
And a smaller portion in the west, including Galicia, is annexed by the Austrian Habsburgs.
And just like that, any hopes for a unified, independent Ukraine are gone.
It's gone.
Setting the stage for the challenges that would define the next few centuries.
And under Russian rule, a policy of Russification takes hold.
Russification?
Yeah, the goal was to assimilate the Ukrainian people.
I see.
Suppress their cultural identity.
And how did they do that?
Well, the Ukrainian language was restricted.
Okay.
Cultural institutions were suppressed. And they really tried to integrate Ukraine into that Russian imperial framework.
Interesting.
But of course, this sparked resistance,
Yeah.
both overt and covert.
Sure.
Despite Russification, that sense of Ukrainian national consciousness remained strong, nurtured by intellectuals and cultural figures who would not let their heritage be erased.
They understood that preserving their language, literature, traditions.
Yeah, it was vital for maintaining that identity.
Absolutely.
And the 19th century sees this blossoming of the Ukrainian national revival.
Oh, interesting. Fueled by romantic nationalism that was sweeping through Europe.
Exactly. And it's more than just a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
It's a reawakening of national identity.
Reclaiming Ukrainian history.
Language, traditions.
In the face of this imperial homogenization.
And writers, poets, intellectuals, they all play a crucial role.
Of course.
They celebrated Ukrainian folklore, advocated for cultural and political rights.
Trying to revive the language, publish literary works, establish institutions.
Exactly. And among these figures, Taras Shevchenko stands out.
Oh, Taras Shevchenko, often hailed as the father of modern Ukrainian literature.
His poetry, written in the Ukrainian language, really resonated with people seeking to define themselves.
Gave voice to their aspirations.
He became a symbol of resistance against Russia.
Wow.
Inspiring generations.
His work was smuggled into Ukraine, circulated clandestinely.
It really became a rallying point for those yearning for a free and independent Ukraine.
And then as we move into the 20th century, the world is thrown into chaos with World War I.
And the Russian Empire collapses in 1917.
Oh, wow.
Which created a very brief opportunity for Ukrainian independence.
Really?
Yeah. After the Tsar abdicates, Ukrainian activists seized the moment, declared the establishment of the Ukrainian People's Republic, the UPR.
This was the culmination of decades of struggle.
It was. But the UPR's existence was precarious from the start.
How so?
Internal divisions, external pressures, and the Bolsheviks, who were trying to reassert control over the former empire.
All insurmountable challenges for this new republic.
It was a multi-front war for survival.
Right.
They were fighting internal rivals, external forces.
But they still managed to establish a government.
Implement reforms, foster unity.
Wow.
But unfortunately, those aspirations for independence, they were thwarted. By 1922, Ukraine is forced into the Soviet Union.
As a Soviet socialist republic?
Yeah.
And the dream of an independent Ukrainian state extinguished once again.
And so begins a new chapter under Soviet rule.
A chapter that was a mix of developments.
Right. On one hand, there were advancements in education, literacy, and industrialization. But on the other hand, it was a totalitarian regime.
Controlling every aspect of life.
Suppressing dissent.
No room for national aspirations or individual freedoms.
And then one of the most tragic events of this era, the Holodomor.
The Holodomor.
It was a man-made famine orchestrated by Stalin's regime in the early 1930s.
A man-made famine?
Yeah.
What happened?
They had this policy of collectivization.
Which aimed to eliminate private land ownership.
Forced peasants onto collective farms. Millions of Ukrainians died.
It's just a chilling testament to the brutality of the regime.
And its total disregard for human life.
The confiscation of grain, the impossible quotas.
The sealing of borders to prevent people from fleeing.
It was systematic.
It was a systematic attempt to break the Ukrainian people.
Wow.
But despite the Holodomor, the repression, the desire for freedom never went away. The memory of independence during the UPR, that continued to inspire hope.
I see.
And then, as Europe plunged into World War II, Ukraine was once again at the heart of the conflict, caught between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union.
This was catastrophic for Ukraine.
Catastrophic.
Yeah.
Physical and psychological scars that lingered for generations.
And the war's end didn't bring peace or freedom.
No. Ukraine remained under Soviet control. And even though there were some efforts to rebuild and modernize,
the Soviet system's control remained tight,
stifling those aspirations for self-determination.
But even still, the seeds of resistance were sown during the war.
Yeah.
Ukrainian nationalist groups, some of whom had collaborated with the Nazis hoping for independence, they ended up turning against both the Nazis and the Soviets.
Fighting for a free Ukraine.
Makes sense.
And so the post-war period is marked by this complex interplay.
Accommodation and resistance.
Ukrainians trying to navigate Soviet rule while preserving their culture.
And nurturing that hope for a future free from oppression.
Underground movements, cultural dissidents, human rights activists, they all kept Ukrainian nationalism alive.
despite the risks they faced. And then things began to change. In the late 20th century,
Cracks started to appear in Soviet power.
yeah, with Gorbachev's reforms, glasnost and perestroika.
They were trying to restructure the Soviet system.
Open it up. But it ended up setting in motion forces that would lead to its collapse.
And with the Soviet grip weakening, Ukraine saw an opportunity.
To finally achieve self-determination.
Decades of suppressed national identity, cultural resistance, this yearning for freedom.
It all came together into this powerful movement.
For independence.
And in 1991,
A watershed moment.
a national referendum
Reflecting the overwhelming will of the people.
resulted in a declaration of independence.
The end of Soviet rule.
A new era for Ukraine,
It was hard won.
achieved through so much struggle and sacrifice.
Yeah, it was greeted with jubilation. And hope.
Hope for a brighter future.
Ukraine was finally master of its own destiny.
But the transition wasn't easy.
No. There was economic instability.
Political corruption.
The legacy of those Soviet structures presented huge obstacles.
And Ukraine had to deal with internal divisions.
Trying to balance European aspirations with its relationship with Russia.
That powerful neighbor to the east. And then you have the Orange Revolution in 2004.
And the Euromaidan protests in 2014.
These were expressions of the Ukrainian people's desire for democracy.
And closer ties to Europe.
This deep yearning for freedom and self-determination.
But they also highlighted the fragility of those aspirations.
And the challenges they faced in trying to chart their own course.
In a region marked by geopolitical tensions.
It's really a story of resilience in the face of adversity. And that brings us to Ukraine's strategic importance today.
And the significance of its fertile land.
The breadbasket of Europe.
Ukraine's position between Russia and the EU has always made it a focal point.
This struggle for influence.
And then you have its vast reserves of Chernozem,
Black Earth.
some of the most fertile soil in the world. And this is why it's called the breadbasket of Europe.
Playing such a vital role in global food production.
This agricultural wealth, its strategic location, have made Ukraine a target throughout history.
Sadly, that continues today.
Control over this land has motivated countless conquests.
Including Russia's annexation of Crimea.
And the ongoing aggression in eastern Ukraine.
Which brings us to 2014, a real turning point.
Russia annexed Crimea.
Supported separatists in the Donbass.
It was a huge escalation of tensions. This violated Ukraine's sovereignty.
Its territorial integrity.
Sent shockwaves through the world.
And Russia's actions, widely condemned as illegal,
were accompanied by this wave of disinformation and propaganda.
Trying to justify their intervention.
The Kremlin's narrative, portraying Ukraine as this failed state.
Controlled by neo-Nazis.
It was all designed to undermine Ukraine's legitimacy.
Sow discord. But these claims have been debunked by historians and analysts.
People who point to Ukraine's long history of resisting Russia.
Its distinct culture, its political identity, what the Kremlin's saying.
It's a distortion of history.
A tool to advance Russia's geopolitical ambitions. And then, in February 2022,
Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Shattering any hope of peaceful coexistence. This unprovoked act of aggression, condemned by the world.
Plunged Europe into its biggest conflict since World War II. Putin's justifications for the invasion.
To denazify and demilitarize Ukraine.
Yeah, they were met with skepticism, disbelief.
These pretexts lacked any factual basis.
And they really served to mask Russia's true goals.
Subjugating Ukraine, expanding their influence. And in response, the world came together.
Sanctions were imposed on Russia.
Military and humanitarian aid was sent to Ukraine.
And the Ukrainian people, demonstrating incredible resilience and determination,
mounted a fierce defense of their homeland. So as we conclude our deep dive into the history of Ukraine,
I think it's clear that this is not just a story of the past.
It's a narrative that's still unfolding.
Shaped by diverse influences.
Marked by triumph and tragedy.
It has forged a nation with an indomitable spirit.
A nation determined to resist external forces.
Ukraine's journey from those ancient civilizations to its current struggle
really reminds us of the human desire for freedom and self-determination.
The echoes of its past resonate in the present,
informing its people's resilience,
shaping their determination to chart their own course.
The future is uncertain.
But Ukraine's history offers valuable insights into the complexities of today.
And the potential trajectory of its future.
It's a testament to the power of human resilience.
The enduring allure of freedom.
And the unwavering spirit of a nation determined to forge its own destiny, no matter the cost.
Reflecting on Ukraine's past,
leaves us with a profound sense of admiration for its people
A renewed appreciation for peace.
and the enduring value of liberty.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.